Hi, today my guest is Gary McKee, 365 consecutive marathon man. So we're going to learn about the consequences if you drink 10 pints and have a curry before the London Marathon. We're going to learn how he became really good friends with Kevin Sinfield, the 200 metres of life-changing memories, and finally the bit of advice that he gave Jurgen Klopp that made it into the Liverpool dressing room. Enjoy. Welcome to Gobsmacked, episode 23. Today I'm joined by Gary McKee. Gary McKee, marathon man, machine, McKee. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you, Catherine.
Now, you're no stranger to the Gobsmacked podcast because you've been featured twice before. But we are now in the wonderful opportunity of doing a reflective, because what did you do last year, Gary?
Last year I ran a marathon a day for a year, so 365 marathons in 365 days.
It trips off the tongue, but it is absolutely unbelievable, isn't it? And there's a couple of times, wasn't there, where you had to do 2 marathons in 16 hours, is that right?
Yeah, so most of the marathons were done in the morning. I'd be up at 5 o'clock, do a bit of stretching, have a light breakfast, do a motivational video, and then get running. I'd finish and then go to work. But there was times when the office needed covered, so I would actually be up at 4:30 in the morning, go to work, do a full shift, come home, and then run a marathon. What that meant was by the end of the week, because I was working morning shift and afternoon shift, I was doing 2 marathons in 16 hours.
So one of the things I think people have found particularly gobsmacking about your story is you'd finish a marathon, sort your thing out with that foamy roller thing you've got on your legs, and you go to work. And what is your role?
I work at Sellafield, the nuclear plant on the west coast in Cumbria. I'm a ops team leader. So I've got a team of 10. We do a lot of work for EDF Energy, shift work. So I've been there for 30 years.
So there's one thing to run a marathon every day, but what would happen if your job went wrong? If something went wrong in your job, what would be the consequences?
Oh, massive. If you think of what happened with Chernobyl, and things like that, but we've got safeguards in place. We've got measures that you can't breach, safety. So there is, to the outside world, there's lots of things that can go wrong, but to those who are doing the job day in, day out, it's your bread and butter. You know what you're doing. You're following rules, regulations, not going outside of your safety case. So it's all.
But it's not a low-key job, is it? I think that one of the things that it's always been a marvel to me that you take annual leave and go off and do all these challenges. So it might be good to give a bit of a chronology of some of the things you've done. So the 365 marathon was obviously a major undertaking, and it raised about, 1.3 million, was it?
Yeah, just over, almost 1.4 million.
And before that, you did the 110, so that was 110 consecutive marathons. Before that, you did 100 consecutive marathons, didn't you? Topped off with a London Marathon.
Yeah.
And I think the point of meeting you was when you did, you ran from Whitehaven to London in, was it, how many days was that?
So I'd always wanted to do the London Marathon, but it was getting in and sponsorship side of things. I decided that I would do it in 2015. And it was a marathon with a little bit of a twist. So I actually ran from my home in Cleatormower to London, around about 350 miles. Took me a week, and then I ran the London Marathon on the Sunday.
And we had our famous night, didn't we? So you stopped off at Leamington Spa. I got up at 5:30 in the morning to throw you with my incredible nurturing catering. So I think it was a coconut risotto with an apricot coulis, Gary, a frittata. And you came downstairs and you said, I don't eat breakfast. Crushed.
Absolutely crushed, yeah. I did have a little go at it though, didn't I? I'm more of a 2 slices of toast with jam and a cup of coffee man.
Yeah, but the good thing is you saw my trembling lip.
I did, yeah.
It didn't matter about the 40 miles. It was about my coconut risotto and coulis, Gary.
I did have a support team with me, Catherine, who said your coconut risotto and coulis was fantastic.
And they supported you well. So we got down to London, didn't we? And we were given the remit to just meet for one drink at about 6:30 at night in a local pub because you were running the marathon the next day. And you run how many miles to get there in, how many miles was it
It was
down?
just short of 350.
350 in a few days.
Yeah.
So we went to this little pub, didn't we? And you don't ever drink, do you, when you're doing your challenges?
When I'm doing a challenge, I maintain my discipline of not letting anything get in my way, and I abstain from alcohol. So last year when I done 365, I hadn't had a drop of beer for 14 months. When we done London, it was the same rules. We'd got there. My brother was driving a support vehicle. My nephew was cycling next to me, and we got to the hotel, dropped our bags off, and I'd told them that I would meet them just up the road in a pub called the Stanhope. It was one of the pubs that we used to frequent on our regular Wembley visits for the Challenge Cup final. So you and John were coming down. You met us in the Stanhope. You were staying in the same hotel as us. And when I went in, Paul asked me if I wanted a pint of orange lemonade, and I had that overwhelming feeling of a pint of Peroni won't go amiss here. And then he couldn't believe that I was asking for a pint of Peroni. I was running the London Marathon the following day, and I convinced him that I would be okay. So I had a pint of Peroni, got the taste for it. You wanted to go for something to eat.
Well, that you had the taste of it so much that you drank 10 pints.
I was getting to that, Catherine. I had one or two more. You kept badgering on about going for something to eat. So by this point, it was round about midnight, and we'd had 10 pints of Peroni. And we ended up in the hotel restaurant, which was an Indian restaurant. And then I had a beef boner and a couple of bottles of Kingfisher and a few more drinks. And then ran the London Marathon the following day.
And if I remember, you had to do an unscheduled Paula Radcliffe style stop, didn't you, because of the curry? And you weren't happy, were you, because your time was a little bit off?
Yeah, I was a few minutes over me expected time, but I put it down to the chicken burner and the toilet stops.
And what made that night so fantastic was because it was so naughty. We all knew it was, but it's gone down in the annals of time. Because I know you, Gary, because you're a childhood friend of my husband, John, aren't you?
Yeah.
Cleator Moore lad himself. And I remember when I first met John, I had these real hopes and ambitions that I found a very nice gentleman to court. And he was taking his girl up to Cleator Moore to meet his friends, of which you were a key target in my crosshairs, because I thought your approval, because he talked so highly of you, your approval was very important. So we met you at Ennerdale Lake, didn't we?
We went for a walk around Ennerdale, I do recall, yes.
So I bombarded you with about 20 minutes of questions trying to get you to talk about your feelings. John looking very, very nervous. And then you stopped in your tracks. Can you remember?
I can't remember. I remember it well. I offered you a boiled sweet. I thought it would give you a bit of a distraction and time to get a bit more air because you hadn't come up for air. And I offered you a sweet, and your words were,
"Don't worry, Gary, I can talk and suck at the same time."
Yes.
You burst out laughing. And we left that as the three amigos, didn't we, and friends forever.
Yeah. It was a number of years ago that now, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I made the course. So, Gary, it's not just been these running challenges, you've done cycling challenges, but also you've done the Fred Whitten. So just explain that one, because that's quite a unique one, isn't it?
So the Fred Whitten's actually a cycle route through the lakes, and it takes in all the Lakeland passes. There's 12,000 feet of climbing. It's got a cut-off time on the bike of 12 hours. And in 2018, I became the first person ever to run it. I ran it, my target time was 24 hours. It's 112 miles in distance. It's difficult. I put a support team together, and we set off from Ennerdale at 9 o'clock in the morning on one Friday morning. I told everybody I'd be back at 9 o'clock the following morning, Saturday. So on stage 2, I was 2 hours ahead of my times. I had to delay my stage stop, spend a little more time drinking tea and eating sandwiches and doing what I needed to do to recover before I set off again. And I actually got in just under 24 hours, raised quite a bit of money, but became the first person to ever run the Fred Whitten, and nobody has actually run it since, which quite surprises me, because I thought once I'd put my marker down on a time that people would say, "Oh, I'm going to have a go at that."
A bit like Roger Bannister and the 4 Minute Mile.
Mm-hmm.
But that is, I mean, the Lake District, I remember you made quite light work of that, but I remember seeing you that morning. I think we got there at about 4:00 in the morning, and it was tough, wasn't it? You had a few moments on that run.
It was brutal. And I've done 24-hour events. I've done 100-milers, and your body starts asking questions after, for me, it's around about 70 mile, between 70 and 80 mile. And you've got to have the answers. You know, if you're setting off to do something, you've got, in my head, you've got to finish it. It's no good saying, I'm attempting to do something. I don't use that word. I just say I'm doing something. And you go out and do it. And I remember I was being sick at about 75 miles in. I'd got a support crew and I'd brought them down to my house to tell them what my expectations of them were. I'd said to them, it'll get difficult between 70 and 80, which it did. And I don't want your sympathy. I want your support. You need to keep me on track. You need to push me. And sometimes it's difficult for people to do that. But as it was, the guy who was driving the support vehicle, I was going up Honister Pass in the dark, absolutely pitch black. I had a head torch on and his van lights were lighting the path up. And I had an overwhelming feeling that I needed to be sick, which I did. And he jumped out of the van and he said, "What's wrong?" And the cyclist who was with me had said, "He's being sick." And he said, "Oh, okay." So he waited till I'd finished being sick and he said, "Are you done?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm done." And he said, "Right, there's a bottle of water, there's a toothbrush, clean your teeth and let's get going." And that was I was thinking, I didn't ask for your sympathy, but I could do it, I could. You know, and I knew I wasn't getting it. It was brutal, but it was my choice to do what I was doing. And I just had to crack on. We got up to a place called Stair, and it was a stage stop, and I needed to sit on my own. The sun was just coming up over the fell. It was a glorious day. And I said to everybody, "I need you to pull in. There's something I've got to tell you." And I thought people thought I was going to say I'd throw the towel in, but I reminded them of how many people were going to be told that they had cancer that day, and that's what we were there for. So then I said, "Who's going to take me home?" And everybody put their hands up, and it was a Spartacus moment. You know, I am Spartacus, and everybody said that they wanted to lead me home. And it was quite humbling at the same time as being emotional, you know, because you're thinking, I've still got 30 miles to do. I look like a spent force. I feel like one, but I've got to put one foot in front of the other. And I still had 2 massive climbs to do. But difficult doesn't mean impossible, does it? It just means that you've just got to dig in a little bit deeper and find what it is that you're looking for.
I'm very touched by what you said there, Gary, because difficult for you is, you know, it is impossible for most people to comprehend, you know, that you can keep digging deep and you keep finding it, because there's no challenge you've attempted, unless you put me right, that you've actually failed to achieve, haven't you? I mean, you've just done the Grand to Grand, haven't you? Maybe just explain what that one is. So
the Grand to Grand, I was invited over to America to take part in a race called the Grand to Grand. It goes from the Grand Canyon, the rim of the Grand Canyon, across the desert to the Grand Staircase in Utah. It's a self-supported race. You put your backpack on and you run for a week. It's 6 stages over 7 days. So one of the days is a day and night. The only thing that the organisers give you is shelter in the form of a tent at the checkpoints when you finish for the day, and water. You carry everything else as a mandatory kit list. So you've got to put up with the weight on your shoulders, which my backpack weighed in at the start at 12 kilograms. The heat, 34 degrees. The terrain, which varied from soft sand to compact sand to lava rocks. People think in the desert it's just all sand. And if you were to see a photograph from above, it looks green, very green, but it's just a covering of sagebrush most of the time. Sagebrush is very, very prickly. And there's lots of cactus and stuff like that. If you stand on a cactus, you know about it. If you brush against one, you're getting the doctor to take needles out. You know, it's the terrain and the environment. It's very, very harsh. But it's also very beautiful, you know, to be standing on the rim of the Grand Canyon, one of the natural wonders of the world, and to run across it and just look at the vast hole that's in the ground, but that's beautiful at the same time. When you come out of the tent at night time, you feel as if you can touch the stars, you know, you're that close, there's no air pollution. So it was a wonderful occasion, and the organisers had contacted me to asked me if I wanted to take part in the race, they'd waived the entry fee, which was $4,000, and a massive attraction to me. So I also seen it as another opportunity to raise money for Hospice at Home West Cumbria, who I'm a fundraiser for, and that's what I did. So it was, again, it was difficult, but
So how many people get through that then?
the dropout rate this year was 42%. So it is billed as one of the toughest races in the world.
Because from West Cumbria, obviously it's mountainous, but there's not a vast amount of sun. There's a bit down St. Bees, isn't there?
Yeah.
That is a very alien environment.
It's the heat as well.
Yeah.
And you're going in at altitude, so you get up to 8,000 feet, and you can feel it when you're running, and certainly with a backpack on. There's a lot of climbing involved, so there was rope ladders. There's a lot of slot canyons where the river has forged its way through and left a beautiful path. And there's ladders to get you down onto the canyon floor. So the terrain does vary a lot. And for me, from running every day last year a marathon distance, I never got a blister, lost a toenail or anything. When I was over in America, because the terrain was so different, my feet were moving in different ways that they would normally. I got lots and lots of blisters that had to be sorted out. They were full of sand, and the doctors were there. They had to cut your blisters off. And I remember being filmed, and lots of people were dropping out because of blisters and just finding it really, really difficult. I never even contemplated what would happen if I dropped out. These people were removed from the course. They had to find their own accommodation. They had to find their way back to Kanab, where it started from, then go to Vegas. And I never ever even thought I wouldn't be able to do it. I did think that if it was going to be difficult, when you look at the word challenge, within that word is the word change. You've just got to change what you're doing to get to the end. If that means slowing down, then slow down, but don't ever think about it's always too early to give in.
I mean, there must be a genetic, physical dimension to being able to do these challenges. But the mental dimension, I mean, the way you're just saying, it really isn't an option that, or it isn't, you don't really invest any energy, do you? Because I know in the 365, it was, for a long time, it felt like the best kept secret in West Cumbria because it wasn't getting the national traction, or at least it didn't feel like it for those of us watching it. You never indulged any suggestion of it. And you just said, you just got up and did the miles, didn't you?
I always said right from the beginning that it was a 365-piece jigsaw, that every day we put a piece in place. And that sooner or later people would see the picture. The impossible would be the impossible to ignore. And that's exactly what it turned out to be. I also likened it, as you know, to the Kevin Costner film, A Field of Dreams, that if we build it, they will come. We build it being the picture, putting the 365 together. Every day was as important as the next. There wasn't a day that wasn't important. You had to make sure you completed one day before you could move on to the next day. But I wasn't getting wowed about the national media not being there to cover what I was doing. I was seeing other people doing things and getting lots of airtime and raising vast amounts of money. That didn't entertain me. What entertained me was putting one foot in front of the other and getting to the end, because it's the end that makes the product.
Well, one of those people was Kevin Sinfield, wasn't he? Because he was doing his, was it 7 ultras?
He was doing 7 ultras. He was actually running from Edinburgh to Old Trafford. The plan was to finish on the field at the World Cup final. And Kevin had contacted me. He'd been given my number by a mutual friend, and he'd asked for some advice on how to do what I'd previously done, and I gave him some advice. And I actually met him. I carried the World Cup out onto the field at Old Trafford in front of 70,000 people, got a standing ovation. I think it was day 324. I'd run a marathon in Manchester in the morning, then walked out with the cup, put it on the field and walked off. And I actually met Kevin in the tunnel at half time, and he was a sore man. He'd picked up a couple of injuries, and when you come towards the end of a challenge, it is quite emotional. You think of what you've pushed your body through, and you think of those people who are very, very close to you, seeing you through your struggles. And Kevin was like that. And when I walked up the tunnel and hugged him, I didn't keep much eye contact with him because I knew that one of us would falter, and he had to address 70,000 people and a worldwide audience of millions. So I just hugged him and I said, well done. And then he contacted me later and he said, listen, Gary, if you need a friend to run when you're finishing off, he said, I'll be there. So he actually came up the day of Doddy Weir's funeral. Kevin came down and he stopped. I booked him a hotel just down the road from us and he came and he joined us, and the word had got out that Kev Sinfield was coming and there was hundreds of people outside. I thought they were coming to see me, but obviously not. But he's just a remarkable person. You know, he's typically one of the lads. And when we were running, he went from the back to the front and he spoke with everybody who wanted to speak with him. And when we got to the halfway point, there was probably another 50 people there and he was signing autographs and he was telling tales. And he just really, really hit it off. But what really stood out to me was when I finished that day, I got a phone call from Radio Cumbria asking how I'd got on. And then they said, I believe Kevin Sinfield was with you. Is there any chance we could have a chat? And I was like looking at Kevin. He was like, Radio. I said, oh, he's just getting in the car. He's just pulling away. And he went, no, I'll speak. So he'd been announced as the rugby defence coach for the England team that day. So the phone back on my phone and Kev answered and he asked him a few questions. What was it like running with Gary? Great company. I always like coming up to Cumbria. I love the vibe. The Cumbrians are great. All that, yeah, spot on. And what do you think about what he's doing? I think it's fantastic. You know, how do you have the energy to do 365 marathons and balance work off with it and this, that and the other? Spot on. I believe you've been
after the scoop
picked to do the England defensive coach. And Kev just cut him straight away and he said, listen, this is about Gary, it's not about me. He said, I'll answer anything you want about Gary, but we're not talking about rugby. You know, he cut him off straight away, which I thought that is the measure of the man.
What a gentleman. Yeah. So, in the gobsmack tradition, you've got your 4 questions. I think we've had a few gobsmack moments already. But what I encourage you to do is to almost do it as a reflective piece, because there must be some insights or some moments, some absolute standout moments. So what would you say is a gobsmack moment or a place of reflection as you do a retrospective on the past few years, Gary?
So normally, and I'll probably talk this with you on numerous occasions, I don't see my achievements as being achievements. I see them as being doing what I'm capable of doing. And that's difficult for a lot of people to understand, because I just do what I do and I do it to help other people. But some of the standout moments from last year, there was carrying the World Cup out onto the field and, you know, being recognised from the rugby league community of doing what I've done and how difficult that was, and getting a standing ovation and clapped off the field. The BBC knocking on the door on the last day and setting me off, and at 7:20 at night, you were there yourself, everybody was looking at the phone. We had an event planned, you know, a celebration of what we'd done, and then the Just Giving page went to over £1 million. So they are standout moments. But I think probably one for me, I also saw lots of people achieving their objective of running a marathon for the first time in their life and not quite believing that they could do that. So when they came with us, they were running 5Ks, 10Ks, whatever, and we'd built up that distance and we built up that confidence to get them to running a full marathon, and to share that experience for the first time is lovely. But probably one of the things that will always remain with me was I was running and I was joined towards the end. So over the year, I ran 9,675 miles, but there was probably 200 metres that will never ever leave me, and it was when I was joined by a group of school children from West Cumbria that attend a school called Mayfield, and it's for children with special needs. So most of the children who were with me couldn't walk. They were in calipers, they were in chairs, they had helpers pushing them. Some of them were non-verbal. And there was 2 children who joined me, and they just held my hand and we walked for 200 metres. And the school had put this song together, and for those who couldn't talk, it was on the pads, and it was singing back to them. But those who could were singing a song about the Marathon Man. And these 2 little children in calipers who were struggling to walk were holding my hands, just looking up and smiling. You know, and you think at that moment, I've got children, and you're so blessed that they're able-bodied and they can do the things that they can do. And we all say, you know, sometimes the pain in the bums, but you know that our pain in the bums, and I just felt lucky that I could do what I was doing, and I wasn't even running, I was walking, and these children were struggling to walk, but looking at me with the biggest smiles on the face, and it just sort of hit home that how fragile life can be and how it can change in a second, and these children had brought that realisation to me.
Because I have a gobsmacked reaction to the community that you come from. I didn't know Cleator Moor, I didn't know that part of West Cumbria at all till I met John. But the people, the generosity, the support that you've had throughout these challenges, how they've had you back, it is an awesome place. And it's a community that's had tragedy. I mean, you've had there was that famous mining accident, wasn't there? Was it 150 men were killed under the sea?
Yeah, that was at Whitehaven, but Cleator Moor was only a few miles from Whitehaven, and everybody's connected to each other. You know, it is a very, very small, well-linked community.
And I always feel that it's remarkable because Derek Bird went on the rampage round your area, didn't you?
Yeah.
And where some communities have got labelled like Hungerford, you know, where the place has been labelled, that area where never was. But that was, I mean, you knew people that day, weren't you?
Absolutely, yeah. I was in Italy at the time, and my phone had went off, and the message came across and said, "What's Birdie doing?" And I said to my wife, "Something's happened at home." And I texted back and I said, "I'm on holiday, what's the crack?" And he said, "Go on your phone, you know, look on the internet." And I looked on, and it was what it was. There was people being killed who we knew. Derek had only been in the club a couple of weeks earlier having a beer with everybody, and it was just, your breath was taken away of how something like that could unfold and happen. There was just no answers to the questions that you had. But Cleator Moor as a whole, it's like a lot of places in towns where shops have closed in the high street because of the recession that we've gone through, because of the cost of living crisis, and COVID didn't help, and the internet hasn't helped. But what Cleator Moor has got is a remarkable sense of community spirit, and I've seen that for a number of years due to the people who have got behind me and supported me. I done a marathon on Saturday. When I was running last year, there was a gentleman came out every single day called Bill Arnott, 74 years old, and he used to make me a cup of tea at the halfway point at Rowder, and he would bring blankets, towels, hot towels, a hot water bottle to cope with the Cumbrian weather. He would have a jacket for me for when it rained every day. And if you remember last year, I actually ran on the hottest day on record
34,
in the UK.
was it?
It was 34 degrees here. It was 40 odd degrees in other parts of the country. But Bill had ice pops for me that day.
Aww.
You know, and it was just lovely. So Bill passed away in August of this year, which was a huge shock to everybody who knew him. He was just the nicest person. He never forgot anybody's name. And we planned to do a marathon in memory of Bill. And it came to light that there was a young lad from Egremont, Charlie Reid, they call him, and his dad used to run with us. His dad was a great runner, a great fella, another popular person, and Charlie had been diagnosed with a brain tumour. So once I'd found out about it, and I knew that the family were struggling, he's had the tumour removed, but it's going to cost them. He's going to have 8 weeks of intense treatment, and they're going to be up and down the motorway, which will cost them a lot of money. So I wanted to raise some funds to help with his travel costs and hotel costs and other things that will be incurred during his treatment. And as usual, the community got behind me and supported me. There was a lady called Nina Albertelli, said, "I'll do a cake sale. We'll finish at the local church hall," which we did. And there was over 50 people running and probably 30 cycling. So there was lots of people came out to remember Bill and to raise funds for Charlie. And we've raised over £6,000 at the moment. There's other events planned. But that'll help go towards, those costs. And additional to that, it gives the family that little bit of comfort that people are there for them.
Absolutely.
Because one of the hardest words to say is help,
Mm.
you know, and ask for help. You shouldn't really have to when you're going through treatment like that, and there is charities there helping, but just to know that people are there,
Yeah.
just to do the smallest things.
Because in fundraising terms now, you've got to have raised over a couple of £1 million, would you say? And you have now been nationally recognised, haven't you? You got a rather special award recently, didn't you? What was that?
Yeah, me and Susan went to London. It was the British Citizens Award. I also got a Commonwealth Award. They're all in drawers in the house. I don't know what they are. I'm not in it for awards. When I was in America, Susan and a couple of others went to London for the Just Giving Awards, where I was chosen as the fundraiser of the year. And that's the second year I've won that. Second time, actually. I think I'm the only person who has. There's been lots of awards over the years, but it's certainly not what you do it for.
Well, it's not what you do it for. So if you put it in the round, the gold for these golds, these bits of golds and insight, would you, in a nutshell, what would it be for you?
I think when you're saying what is the gold, it's what's been the light bulb moment, isn't it? When is the penny dropped? That I was sitting outside my tent in America with my feet half hanging off, and somebody came in who was struggling and almost dropped to the floor trying to take the backpack off, and they said, "Why do we do this? Why do we put ourselves through this?" And I was looking across a beautiful setting. Zion was in the distance and the mountains, and it just looked absolutely beautiful. And I thought back to, for some reason, to an old lady who came up to me in the supermarket, and I'd never met her in my life. I'd never set eyes on her, but she put her arms around me and she had tears in her eyes and she kissed me. And she said, "Thank you." And I said, "For what?" And she said, "For giving the support that I got when my husband was dying, hospice within our house, and they just made it so much easier." And it was one of them moments when you think how everything that you've gone through in your challenges, and sometimes I just put a steel ring around myself and I don't let anything in. I'm focused on and driven on what I want to do. But it's knowing that what you're doing is helping others, and that's something that will always resonate with me, what that lady said, as to how I can express myself going forward in the future. And when I think about what my children have done to support me, Bo ran for 501 consecutive days, raised over £35,000. Alfie cycled 110 marathons that I ran. He raised over £5,000 himself. And Minnie, when I've just done the Grand to Grand, she cycled 171 miles on the spin bike at home. She's only 11 years old. She went and got a candle made for the local company called Lakeland Lights, and they donated all the money towards my Just Giving page. So she raised over £1,500, but she's pushed herself further. And it just, to me, it is, I can't do everything on my own. I'm getting older, as we all are, but I realise that I've got a family who I can pass the baton to, and who's seen me fundraise all my life, and who can take that step forward further.
It's real legacy stuff, Gary, that you've done. It is. Or just quickly mention the Jurgen Klopp story, just dead quick, because I love it.
So Bo had ran for 501 consecutive days. He won a Pride of Sport award, which is on the same themes as the Pride of Britain, only on the sporting theme. And we went to London to receive his award, and it was supposed to be presented by Trent Alexander-Arnold. And he couldn't make it because he was on Liverpool duty. We were invited to the press conference, the Bayern Munich game. And when we came out, Mr. Klopp came over to congratulate Bo, and he said, Trent had came up on the big screen and said, "I'll invite you to Anfield." So we went to Anfield. This is where that kicked off from. And Mr. Klopp said, "How do you run for 501 days? How old are you, Bo?" He said, "I'm 11. Mr. Klopp, I was 10 when I started." And he said, "That's fantastic. Was there not days when you were this, that, and the other, tired, didn't want to do it?" And he said, "No, there was never that." He said, "My dad said a word to me every single day that we run. And it's a Latin word, and I gave him the translation of it." So he was all ears at this point, and he said, "Explain more." So Bo said to me, "Go on, Dad, do it." So I looked at Bo and I said, "Resurgam." And he gave me the translation, which is, "I shall rise again." And Klopp was looking around and he said, "Jordan." St. Jordan Henderson called him over and he went, Bo's got a story. So he told, go on, Dad, do it again. So we done it again, and them two's looking at each other. Klopp said, that goes in the changing room, John. And Liverpool won the European Cup that year. And I tell everybody it's because of Bo's story that he got them up and he lifted them, and I shall rise again. So Klopp loved it, Jordan loved it, and they give him a shirt. They give him 2 shirts. One was Henderson on the back with keep up the great work, Bo, you'll never walk alone. And then they give him a shirt that was signed by all the players that he auctioned, and he got £750 that he put on the. He's just given page, but he raised over £35,000. The kids have been fantastic in giving me the support that I've needed to get through the challenges I've done.
I mean, you've already, as we go on to the third question, you've already mentioned quite a few places where you could, I bet you can acutely remember that moment where you went. Is there anyone that stands out above all others?
Of a moment in time where I remember where I was when something happened.
Yeah, a very specific moment.
I think one last year that will stand out for anybody. If you ask an older generation, they always remember where they were when JFK was shot.
Mm.
And I think if you ask this generation in years to come, they'll always remember where they were when they were told the Queen had died.
Mm.
And I was actually at work, and I was on a conference call, and we were afternoon shift, and the shift manager had said, oh, by the way, I think the Queen's passed away. And there was a silence on the phone, because the Queen featured in every single one of our lives. You know, she was Queen all of my life. I was running the following day, and I was thinking, I wonder how this will impact on the run. And it did. It massively did. Everybody was, you know, talking about it. It was world news. And I remember on the day of the funeral, we'd set off at 5 o'clock in the morning. I was going to work, but we'd set off early because we all wanted to watch the funeral on TV, and it was dark. It was pitch black. We had head torches on. I think there was about a dozen people. And I'd said, as soon as we get the first light, we'll do 2 minutes silence, and then we'll carry on. And one of the guys who was with us, it was his 60th birthday that day. He was on the bike. He's got Parkinson's, and he's used what I was doing as a way to get out of the house and to focus on not thinking about his Parkinson's, and, you know, to try and help him. And it was fantastic. And at first light came, we stopped at a bridge, and we looked down towards the sea at St. Bees, and the mist was rising off the floor. And it was just the perfect setting. And there was 2 minutes silence, and then we nodded to each other, and we carried on. But none of us spoke for about 10 minutes, you know. And whenever Michael, whose birthday it was, contacts me, or he'll send me a picture, he'll say Queen's Memorial Bridge, which is now what he calls it. So that was one of the moments. But as I said earlier, with the school children from Mayfield carrying the cup out, there's been lots of things that will stand out, but they're just some of them. As we go forward in our lives, other things, you know, make a mark on you that you never forget.
Because sometimes you have it in your mind that these will be the big moments. And then often, like you talked about, meeting those children from Mayfield School, it's often in the tender and the intimate, isn't it? That sometimes it can be, you know, you expect the big rock and roll moments, but sometimes you get gobsmacked by those moments of human connection or
just
kindness.
the simple things, yeah.
Yeah. So the final question I have for you today is a film, a book, a quote, something that resonates with you that you would like to share.
I think it's got to be the Kevin Costner crack, hasn't it?
Yeah.
If they build it, they will. If we build it, they will come. It was only me who was sitting back, not worrying about it. The day that we set off.
With the 365, you mean?
For the 365, yeah. I'd been with my employers on the 29th of December. They'd asked me to go down to work and get a photograph. And I always thought that they didn't give me the support and the help that I needed. Maybe it was just me thinking that, and I can understand that it was difficult for them. I've still got a job to do. But when I went down there, I was with the director, and he'd said to me, "You're 2 days off finishing." I said, "That's right, yeah." And he said, "Who would have believed it?" I said, "Well, I would." And he said, "Yeah, I know that, but I meant," and he was stuck for words. He didn't know how to finish the conversation. But he'd said to me, I was the guy who was asked or tasked with asking you to tone it down, to not do 365, because we thought it would be too much for anybody. And I said, I know you were. And he said to me, we're going to put some money on the page today. I said, how much? How much? And he said, I don't know, but I will let you know later. And to cut to the chase, it was £55,000 that they put on the page.
Wow.
So that took me over the £500,000. So then I had less to raise than I'd already raised. It was still £500,000. But I still had the confidence that we would do it. You know, if you look back to the first podcast that we'd done,
Yeah.
I said, on 365, they will come. And we will raise that £1 million. So I only had 24 hours to do it. And everybody was thinking, yourself included, where's it going to come from?
Well, we were because some days you'd run a marathon, and if you got 150 quid on your page, and then there was a big amount of money, but from that New Year's Eve, unforgettable, you know, a gobsmacking moment for all of us from the minute that we got there with the BBC and everybody outside the house. Terrible weather. But then I thought, well, it's fair enough because we could have wanted a nice Christmassy scene, but you ran in absolutely phenomenally awful weather, so it was all right. We should have got some rain. And then every time the Just Giving page uploaded, it was going up in tens of thousands.
It was.
It'd never been around anything like that. And I think it was like 7:21 on New Year's Eve, the 1 million. And Gary, it was just...
It was just when we were running, every day there was boxes put out for me with water in and chocolate, and there was people done that at known locations. So when I got down to Moore Row, 4 miles into the run, there was over 150 people running that day, or cycling, or part of what we were doing. And I went to take a photograph and my phone pinged and I looked, and it was a Just Giving page, and it'd gone from 550, I think it was, to 650, you know, £100,000 in 40 minutes. And that was at 8 o'clock in the morning, 20 past 8 in the morning. And you're thinking, if this keeps going on, and I just thought, we're going to get there anyway. Susan always said that she thought I would raise $1 million, but not on the day, you know, but we did. It was a fantastic feeling. People were shouting out the number. 720, I thought they were shouting my pace. I was thinking, I better slow down. And then it kept going up. 8:30, I was thinking, well, I have slowed down. That was the figure.
Oh, you mean how quick you were running the miles?
But when we were just about to finish, I think I had 10 miles to do, and the page was going up and up and up. There was a little guy who came with me from London. He'd been following me. He'd come run with me. He organised me runs in London when I went to the Olympic Stadium. And he'd said to everybody, well, he'd said to me first, he said, if by the time we finish, if your page isn't on £1 million, I'll make the difference up. He's an investment banker. So he obviously isn't short of a few bob, but that wasn't the point. The point was that he was wanting me to get to that £1 million. He was willing me on. And as it turned out, he didn't need to make anything up.
That's a very shrewd man.
Yeah. But it was a fantastic moment.
So, Gary, I mean, we're concluding today. I suppose, have you got anything else planned, or are you going to surprise us like you typically do?
I don't like surprises. I like to be planned. I like to know what's going on. But there'll always be something as a fundraiser. It's about helping other people. It's not about what you can do yourself. It's about what you can show other people that they can do. So there will be something. I don't know what that is. Next year is next year. And we'll just wait and see.
So I want to thank you because you are the Gobsmacked podcast hat-trick guest. You've been on it 3 times, and every time it's an absolute delight, Gary. So I thank you for everything you've done and everything you're going to do, and for just being my friend.
I thank you too.